leave that button really, really tiny. You know what? If they don't have that kind of fine motor control, they don't deserve to make blank notes, do they? No, that's a terrible attitude. Let's fix it. Shouldn't be too hard. Too many files open. So this is in the sidebar, right? Let's look at our CSS for the sidebar. Again, it probably should have been a separate component, but oh well. Won't worry about that right this second. So we have a class of new note on the button. None of our rules seem to depend on that. We just look for any old button in the sidebar for these rules. So how about we move that class up to the link? Will that work? Link isn't a real DOM element. Let's see. Let's look in our React Dev Tools. Let's make sure it's this one over here, class name, new note. Yep, totally works. The A inside there will have the class name. So we can actually get to it that way. So here's the problem. If we look at the styles that are on this button, a button in the sidebar has a width of 60%. 60% of what? The width of its parent. Its parent was the entire sidebar. So it was 60% of the entire sidebar. Now it's 60% of the link, which is tiny. So let's add a rule for sidebar a.newNote. And let's set its width to 60% and its position to relative. Heck, we could do that part up there too. The margin. In which case I'd probably put it first. And inside a link, actually, this probably doesn't even need. The pointer cursor should just happen. So then the button could take up 100% of its parent, because its parent is now the link, which has a width of 60%. Hey, it worked. It's back. Ah, nope, still doesn't do the pointer the way we want. Okay, that's coming back. Yay, our button's big again. Woo, and so smooth. Look at that hover effect. I love it. So now let's deal with these things. These are hideous. So that's in NoteList, right? We didn't have a separate style sheet for the note component. Probably should have, but we didn't. So NoteList CSS. We do lots of styling of the LIs. But now we've got links around those LIs. We already had A's though, right? We already had the on-click on an A. But now it's an A that actually has an href. And that's actually styled differently. That gets underlined by default. So we need to deal with that. So before we start worrying about the LIs, let's worry about the link. So ul hash notes. These all should have really been scoped under this NoteList class, but we didn't. We're not going to worry about it right now. So an A, right? A link. So there are pseudo classes for anchors that are actually links that actually have an href. Ones that you're hovering over. Ones that you've previously visited, because you know they turn purple by default instead of blue once you visited them. So there's a pseudo class for that. And there's one for active. Like when you're actually clicking on it, it'll turn red usually. There's separate pseudo classes for those, and we want to make sure the rule we're about to set applies to all of them. So UL notes A, fine. UL notes A colon link. So it actually has an href. UL hash notes A visited. UL hash notes A hover. UL hash notes A colon active. The order actually matters for which one's going to overrule which one. There's a mnemonic device that I use to remember that. Love, hate, L, V, H, and active has a T in there somewhere. I learned that once and I thought, hey, I've never forgotten it. So anyway, I want the color to be whatever the color of its parent is, not to change just because we're doing something to it. And I don't want it to be underlined, so text decoration, none. Underline would be a text decoration. Strike through, same way. Much better. Now my cool fadey effect isn't happening anymore. It's because that was on the LI instead of the A. But notice also, there are no borders between these things. There used to be borders. What gives? I think we had borders on all but the first one, right? So inside this notes UL, an LI that was the first of its type within its parent. The .note div inside that should have a border top of none. Well, guess what? All the LIs are now the first of type. Because what's their parent? That link, right? So they're all the first child of their immediate parent. So what I could say is A colon first of type LI. So an LI that's descended from a link that is the first of its type doesn't have a border. So then only the first one won't have that border. Yay, the borders are back. Woo! Now my sweet transition isn't there. That's bogus. Where's my sweet transition? Sweet transition. There it is. That's not happening on the A, is it? Yeah, the background color on the A, that situation is not quite what we want. And that makes me a sad panda. I made the CSS so differently this time. Could be a tad difficult to make it match. So anything that's inside the LI, but not the A. So what if we just say A? A? A. Yep. Now it's got the smooth transition. It might be a little subtle. And something a little funny is happening with the border when we do that. Yeah. No, I'm doing that next. I know I don't have much time. I'm getting ready to finish this. Well, there's something a little funny going on with that border, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. So, fix or adjust CSS for sidebar and NoteList. Yay. And this thing's working pretty darn well. And it doesn't look too bad either.